This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Breaking Banks Europe. We're going to talk about how financials are being dealt with by Gen Z, the next generation that needs to cope with money, but doesn't always have the ways to find how to do that. And we've got some really cool people here that are going to help us explore this one. And it's called Money Under 20. So how are actually the under 20s dealing with money and how are they actually getting their financial information? So we've got Taylor Price here on the show. Welcome, Taylor.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, and I think you've got quite a nice reach in which you actually support people by understanding financial means. And I'd love to dive in deeper there in a bit to see what you're up to. Can you tell us a bit about your background?
Oh, of course. So I'm currently 22 right now, just past the under 20 age. I started this entire journey when I was 17, 18 years old, came to the realization after switching majors in college in the United States from pre-med to finance, only to realize that only 6 out of 50 states in the United States at that time required financial literacy courses for testing. And so I was a corporate finance major and I thought I was missing a whole bunch of gen eds or something because I'm like, am I in the right class? I feel like I'm missing a whole bunch of knowledge, just like basic credit card information, what's a checking account versus a savings account. I'm about to turn 18. How do I pay my taxes? And come to this realization, I eventually started posting blogs about why isn't the United States teaching this, but also my own personal financial life on, hey, I'm starting a Roth IRA. It's this thing in the United States that can eventually make me a millionaire by the time I'm 65 or 59 and a half. That eventually led over to YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And now here we are today. It's been a super exciting journey so far.
Really cool. Really cool. Thanks for sharing, Taylor. We'll definitely dive in deeper there as well in a bit. But we've got another distinguished guest today, Milan Singh. Milan, great to have you on the show as well.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here. Can you tell us a bit about your background as well?
Yeah, so I started my journey. Well, I first started learning more about finances and stuff kind of in high school because from my parents, I just learned how important saving was so you can do a lot of stuff with that money. But again, they only taught me the saving aspect because most people, even most parents, don't really understand the whole investing aspect of things and how to really manage your money to make it grow properly. So I got the saving part down, and then I got to college, and that's when I really started reading books. I really started getting into business. I remember one of the first ones was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then from there, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Think and Grow Rich. And I started reading all these books. And then I also discovered YouTube. There were channels like Graham Stephan's, and I had no idea none of this ever existed, right? So in college, I get exposed to all this new knowledge of finance. And then throughout college, I'm just consistently learning. And I'm also majoring in financial mathematics at the time, and also stats and stuff. So I was taking a lot of finance classes and stuff. But again, the stuff they teach you in school is not really applicable to real life stuff. So I'm learning all these complicated things about finance and about stocks and put options and call options and all this stuff. But again, most people don't really apply that stuff to their everyday lives. So I was learning all that, and I was learning the more, I guess, common stuff like about credit cards and about budgeting when it comes to finance. So throughout college, I just consistently kept learning. And then after I graduated, I discovered TikTok, and I was like, hey, I'm already doing this stuff. I'm already investing. I remember in college, I don't recommend this, by the way. I took out a $3,000 student loan and I invested that into index funds, and I ended up making $1,000 profit. But I just kept doing these things, right? So I had taken the action, I had learned. And then after I graduated, I saw TikTok and I was like, okay, well, there's this looks like super cool opportunity where I can share the information, share what I've learned so far, and kind of just see where it goes. And then slowly it's just turned into a career. And it's been a wild journey that I never ever had imagined. And it's been great.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think both of you got such an enormous reach with your activities. But from that perspective, it's kind of funny, I think, what you're both describing, that the information was basically already there. It's just not channeled towards the people that need it, right? So I think that's what you both discovered. So what do you think what's going on there? How come actually people don't have access usually to that kind of information?
I would love to take this one. At least
Bring
in
it
the
on.
United, yeah, at least in the United States, culturally, socially, money is not supposed to be talked about at the dinner table. And I think one of the things that Milan and I do is challenge that status quo and end this silent um, pandemic of financial illiteracy by having some of these hard conversations that maybe parents don't do because they're not comfortable speaking about their finances with their children, or teachers don't talk about it because they never got the financial education themselves.
Which is actually quite funny, because I think from a European perspective, we generally think that people from the USA are quite financially savvy, because everyone at least learns to invest for their own pension, which nobody does in Europe. But then again, that's also a small aspect, of course, of the financial literacy you're actually talking about. What do you think, Milan?
Yeah, I think similar to what Taylor said, it's like a taboo to talk about money. Like asking your teacher how much you make, or asking your parents about money. They're like, oh, you don't need to worry about that when you're young, right? How much is the car payment? Well, you don't need to worry about that. How much is our mortgage? How much is our home payment? Oh, don't worry about that. We don't talk about that stuff. That's kind of how the mindset is for a lot of people here in the US when it comes to talking about money. Like it's considered rude to ask somebody how much they make. I mean, that's a big reason why I think so many people are financially illiterate. It's just there's this fear and embarrassment to talk about money. So what happens? That's your whole subconscious mindset is, I don't like, I shouldn't be talking about it. So guess what? You're not going to learn about it. You're not going to learn how to invest your money. You're not going to learn how to budget. Right. So then that is the mindset that's embedded in most Americans, which is why a lot of people don't know and don't start investing or don't start saving until later down the road. And that I mean, the studies and the data speaks for itself, right? Like a lot of people are living from paycheck to paycheck. During COVID, I think people couldn't even afford like a $400 emergency. Like a majority of the people, over 50%, which is insane. But I don't know the stats for Europe, but in the US, it's not really that good with how much money that is around here.
It's familiar. I think it's quite common as well. I think there's a lot of welfare systems here that are actually also at the point of breaking, because you see that everything is under tension, especially with current rising prices. People are really struggling to meet ends at the bottom of the pyramid, let's say. And also there you see on the literacy side that it's also not common to talk about salaries. There are some exceptions in Europe, like for example in Sweden, for example, where you could actually look up everyone's salary in a database, which is public. Completely different setup, but in most European countries it's also not done to talk about your income. But indeed, it's also I think what you struck upon is the fact that it's not just about teaching, but also about doing, right? So I think it's not the way to learn to cope with money is actually, for example, the best way to learn to make investments is actually to have losses, probably, right? Not just wins, because it's not realistic to just have wins. You actually have to understand that there's a downside to it as well. And that's probably how to do that. What do you think about that, Taylor? Is that something that you could? How are we actually getting people to do that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty dangerous when you first start going into something like the stock market or real estate or crypto, and you come out with a big win first, because it's this, hey, there's a lot of money to be made here. Whereas if you lose money to start off with, I think you realize the value of a dollar and how hard it is to make it appreciate and really grow your money tree. And so for me personally, I know it's kind of hard to say this, but I appreciate a loss first to understand, make that loss into your future success with different approaches such as diversification, rebalancing, and using different like asset allocation strategies.
Yeah. But hopefully not the discouragement to actually make investments, right? After your first loss, because that happens as well. Yeah.
Right.
I think that reminds me of something I was reading the other day. It's about people that have a heart attack tend to survive a lot longer, tend to take care of their health a lot more after that heart attack, right? So it's that same way in investing. It's you're a lot more aware of it because of that loss, and then you're going to be much more cautious. You're going to learn a lot more before you start investing money again, so you don't lose like last time.
I would be interested to know, for example, as well, if that people that know someone who had a heart attack would actually also improve their lives. I think there's also a sort of overspill effect that could also play a role, and especially also in the financial side, right? If you know someone who went bankrupt, I think you're more cautious with your finances than if everything has been just, like a fairy tale.
Definitely.
Most definitely. Yeah, those who were affected by 2008, 2010, they take a look and see the stock market or the housing market is very dangerous because their family, friends, somebody close within their network had a horrible experience. And so it kind of has this generational trauma attached to it of, oh, my parents lost a lot of money in the stock market because of this, or the housing market because of this. And so, again, I think Milan and I are here to empower so many young people that case, that money story doesn't have to be yours. And we live in such different times now, and there's so much accessibility to what's out there. Even conversations like this today really weren't, Milan and I are super young, and it's just amazing to even be able to speak about this in a professional setting that we can be heard as well too.
I think it's really important. By the way, if you keep on saying that you're very young, then I feel very old. But I think it's quite interesting to see, and I think what I'd like to pick your brain on as well. Sort of what do you see? What have you identified yourself as sort of the critical things that you need to learn about? I think we've touched a little bit about investing as a sort of a basic need, but I think it's beyond that as well, right? I mean, it's quite a broad spectrum of things you need to know to be financially healthy, for example.
Yeah, so I love this concept because my parents, my mom specifically, always told me growing up, and I'm a natural spender, Taylor, money does not grow on trees. And so I kind of came up with this concept when I got into this space. Well, conceptually, if you think about it, we can plant our little money tree seed. And this is having that growth mindset that there are opportunities out there to get what you want out of life. And I think it really starts with the mindset and doing self-reflection and identifying your values, which then relate to financial goals and the way in which you operate those.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have this small little tree, roots need to start growing, such as your savings accounts and your emergency funds, because if a financial storm comes by, you need to have something kind of protecting and keeping your money tree rooted. Then you allow your tree to grow. You have your primary source of income as your financial core of your trunk of your tree. And that also needs to be protected as well too with bark from a tree, or you can think about that as insurance. So just as a tree might have insect enemies or something like that trying to get at the core, this insurance can help you protect your assets. And then you grow this money tree with these different branches, and those branches are a little bit weaker, but they can create the money leaves, such as your investments in the stock market and other investment vehicles. And these have the passive income effect where your money leaves just continuously grow. And of course, if you spend, those money leaves are falling off. If you're saving, the money tree is really flourishing. So
you got
that's
this really well thought through. I can hear that.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah. And that's kind of the concept of the money tree. And then, of course, there's the fertilizer of your money tree, reviewing your finances and making sure that you're building financial resilience. So that's the money tree concept.
Really nice. Really nice.
Yeah.
What do you think, Milan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any sort of concept like that, but I think just getting the foundations down is extremely important because obviously that's how you build on everything. So, I mean, first of all, mindset, like Taylor was saying, which is it's perfect. Like you need to have the right abundance mindset when it comes to money, that there is money out there. You don't need to be saving Like if you want a $5 Starbucks, it's okay to have that. It's more about the bigger things. It's more about the bigger picture, and just getting your main stuff down, like cutting down on your I guess your credit card spending, or at least keeping your credit card balances extremely low so you're not paying these crazy high interest rates, right? Stuff like that. So I think that's very pivotal. So even before you get into investing, just figure out, like, I think credit cards is extremely important, like only using your credit cards for purchases and then paying that off right away, only using it for things that you can actually afford, for stuff that you can pay off, right? So like something like that. Just the main foundational concepts of, I think just a simple concept of the budgeting rule, 50/30/20 is another good one. It's, I think 50% goes to your what was it? 50% goes to your wants,
Needs.
30% to your needs, and then 20% goes to your, I think it's like investing or saving. But you can allocate it however. Just these type of foundational concepts I think are extremely important before you even get into the deeper stuff, before even investing into the stock market, right? Like maybe first save some money and actually have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund before you start doing some of the complicated things such as investing, or before you even start getting into saving through certain tax loopholes and stuff, right? So making sure that you have these foundations down, I think, is extremely important. And then Taylor's money tree concept is actually perfect because that's kind of how it focuses. Like you have the foundations that kind of grow into these other and different categories. So absolutely agree with everything Taylor was saying before.
Definitely. Also, if you can reap the fruit, right? That's also something
Yes.
that you could really make explicit, how people can actually benefit from it directly. But I like what you're saying as well, Milan. I think are you also familiar with the 1% rule? As in, basically, if there's 1% of your annual income, if you want to spend some over that you at least have to wait 3 days before you do it, right? So basically that you pause your spending when it exceeds a certain level, and say, okay, I might decide on it today, but I'm not going to do it today. I'm going to wait 3 days at least before I actually do it. So I have some time to rethink whether this is really where I want to spend my money.
I think I've heard of the 7-day one. It's similar to that. So where you actually wait 7 days, or you wait like a week, and then
I might get it wrong as well. So I think that's the nice thing as well. With so many people that influence the way we think about finances, there's so many rules popping up as well. I think at the same time.
Oh yeah, of course. But I think that's a great rule actually, because normally people want to buy right away. There's these impulse purchases, and that's how we are marketed to. Most of these companies want us to buy based on impulse and buy right away. But if you wait 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, you'll realize that you don't actually want that thing. Sometimes I'll just add something to cart on Amazon, and if I don't order it right away in a week, I won't even want it. So we just have to get past these impulsive needs as well, right? Where we're spending money on stuff that we don't even want at the end of the day, and that we'll just get it right away, and we get that little dopamine rush, I guess, and then we never use it. So just becoming aware of stuff like that, I think, is very foundational.
No, definitely.
I would love to add another point to that. You had one concept, Milana, that it was 7 days, and Don, you had that it was 3% of your annual income, and then you have to wait a certain time period. Personal finance is so personal, and this is what I love to tell people as well too, that everybody has their own different ideation. And so when you're going to look on social media or these books, it's kind of, you have to approach it like a cookbook. Like some might leave a sour taste in your mouth, others might be really fun and exciting recipes to try. It's all about grabbing those financial essentials, what I call finesse, that works for you. So I think that's a really important to leave with listeners today too.
Totally agree. I think it's really wise to gather as much wisdom as you can and just identify how people are doing it, and then figuring out what works well for you to actually manage your own situation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'm also curious about in this context is the how you actually we talk about investing, which usually is about generating passive income, but on sort of the active income side. One of the things I really like about the tech evolution that we're in is that actually there's a lot of earning capabilities, new ways of work, being identified every day, basically. How do you look at that? How basically just from renting out your apartment to actually, running errands or cooking a meal for someone or selling it, right? There's just so many ways popping up because there's platforms for everything. Anyone could be a trader on Amazon or Alibaba, or indeed basically set up or make money by going onto social media and finding a way that's attractive for people to follow. These income generating activities, I think, are quite an interesting perspective as well on creating economic prosperity, right? Just curious about your thoughts about that.
Gen Z, I think, embodies this idea of autonomy and being independent and being efficient. And they see their parents or their guardians or somebody within their family or friends that is slaving to a 9 to 5 job and is just having trouble making ends meet. What's going on with SVB and Credit Suisse, and there's this banking crisis right now too, that a lot of people, at least in the United States, don't have a lot of trust in our government right now. And so they just don't have a lot of trust, period. And I think that goes into Gen Z and how, with us, the freelancer economy, the side hustle or gig economy has been expanding during this time, especially in the pandemic, where a lot of people were getting laid off or furloughed and coming to this realization that nothing is guaranteed, even if you have a college degree. And so this is where people like Milan and I arise. At least speaking for me, TikTok was something that I enjoyed, but it's not something that I thought could be profitable. And I'm able to monetize my passion while also having a great impact on the globe.
Yeah, cool. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Because even with, I didn't know initially with social media that like there was a lot of monetization opportunities, because I remember doing it just for the first 6 months. I was just uploading a video, and then the opportunities started to come. But then I did not know how much money was in the space and the monetization opportunities. So it makes it much more, I guess, incentivized to talk about the things that we like and that impact people, right? Because then we can spend more time on it because we can make money from it as well. And I think that's a huge opportunity that social media has created for the right people that want to share the right information. I think it's very valuable for most people, that the opportunity that's been created with social media, and everybody gets just value from it. That's why people watch. That's why Taylor has a massive following, because so many people are getting value from it.
No, totally. And I think from that perspective, it's pretty democratic, right? In the sense that actually, indeed, where the followers are, where people watch your stuff, that's where the money goes. Yeah, really nice. So cool. And is it also something that you would actually educate people on? So, I mean, do you see that as part of a sort of a financial literacy side as well, or do you see that as something separate?
In terms of educating on social media? Yeah, I think it's a part of it. I think if you can, again, though, it's gonna come down to, because as we talked about earlier, everything is personal and everybody's situation is very different and unique. So it's gonna come down to you to not just go to one resource. Don't just listen to me. You still have to do research on these concepts. Just because you heard of the 50-30-20 rule from me, you should still be going out and doing more research on these budgeting concepts. Maybe that's not the right allocation for you. Maybe it's going to be 60-30-20 for you, right? 60% goes to your needs. So I think it's good. I think it's a part of it. But again, it's only a part of it. It's not the complete picture. You can't just go to my account and just learn every single thing. There's so many different things. There's so many different aspects. There's so many different angles you can hit on all these different concepts that, okay, maybe for me, you come to my page and it's a good intro to these concepts. And now you look into it a little bit more so that you can find what works best for your situation. So I think it's all together. But again, it's gonna not a single resource isn't enough for anybody, and everything just kind of comes together and completes it for each person. But I wouldn't say that, oh, you can just go to a single page and you'll learn everything, right? Because there's always going to be different aspects that you need to research for yourself.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I think it's indeed, there's with so much information available and so many different channels, there's definitely, you need to educate yourself in a broad perspective from different angles.
Exactly. Yeah.
How about you, Taylor? How wide does your tree grow? Basically, you talk about your model. I think it's a really nice one. Definitely catchy.
Yes. Yeah. To play off what Milan said, again, just personal finance is personal. I think that's a specialty of social media today, is that actually, I think when I started, I started in 2019, December 2019, posting on TikTok. And I was the first young female to start talking about financial literacy on the platform. Now today, after the pandemic has happened, after people are starting to become more educated, they're getting inspired to share their own stories. And I think it's an amazing opportunity for the average consumer to not only one, get this accessibility, but two, relatability. Because just like Milan said, there are different peoples from different cultures, from different backgrounds that have different values. And by having this amount of financial content creators or finfluencers, I guess is what we're titling it here for this podcast, there's this opportunity for somebody to learn. So there's no excuse at this point in time. You have the opportunity, and it's just a matter of, like Milan said, taking it.
Definitely. By the way, on that note, I think it's really interesting to dive in a bit deeper about the concept of finfluencer and whether you actually think that you are one, or whether we should call you something else. But let's do that after the break. So I'll ask you all to be a bit patient, and see you all soon.
Do you want to be part of Breaking Banks Europe? Reach out and learn more about the opportunity to be featured in one of our shows. With over 1.6 million listeners and counting, Breaking Banks Europe is bound to become the place to advance critical dialogue in Europe and the UK fintech scene. Reach out on Instagram or Twitter at Breaking Banks EU, or go to www.provoke.fm.
Thank you all for joining us again for the follow-up on the Breaking Banks episode 170 on money under 20. And we're just about to actually pick up again on the discussion of influencers, because very often everyone who gives any kind of financial advice online on social media is being called a finfluencer. But of course, there's a great variety of different ways people actually influence people. And should you actually be influencing people or just informing people? But Taylor, what do you think about that? I think you have an idea about this.
I think it's a great question and a great conversation topic. So when we traditionally think of an influencer, back when Instagram started in like 2010 or the 2010 range or something along those lines, we think of an influencer as somebody who's on the beach, who's driving Lamborghinis, who is living this luxurious lifestyle, or the lifestyle that a lot of people get addicted to or want to strive for. Whereas I think what Milan and I are doing is really being an advocate or activist in informing people about these opportunities when it comes to growing your money tree, rather than just influencing them to do these different kinds of activities.
Yeah. Okay. And so you see there's a big difference there. And so do you see also in influencing, or whatever you want to call it, do you see actually that are these guys still around, or girls, that actually are mixing the two, basically, and trying to provide this ideal life picture that a lot of people might want to follow, and actually are also into financial advice? Or do you see a much more sober approach generally to financial channels?
There are so many content creators now, and I think that's what the beauty of it is. Like, I'm not gonna lie, although I don't have a Birkin bag, I love the idea of a Birkin bag, in that it can outperform the S&P 500. So yes, there's a part of luxury, but there's also a part of this area where you can combine the two worlds. Same thing with like a Patek Philippe or a Rolex that actually outperformed the stock market this year so far. And so there are these different worlds that you can live in. It's just a matter of the mindset in which you have to fine tune it to your own financial essentials.
True. Milan?
Yeah. So on the whole influencer aspect of things, just like Taylor, I consider myself a creator. I don't think influencer does have a different connotation to it. For me, whenever somebody asks me, oh, like, what do you do? I'd say I'm a creator. It's not, I don't say influencer, but yeah, for me too, I think it's more about informing, and it's just letting them know, okay, here's what you can use, or here's what you should do, but or here's what can work for certain situations, but it's ultimately up to them. Like, it's for educational purposes. This is education, and it's not advice. So that's kind of how I leave it up to. That's something I literally put in every single video, that, hey, this is not this is not advice, right? Because again, as Taylor was saying, everybody's situation is different cultural backgrounds, different values. So I always want to make that very clear that, hey, this is for educational purposes. Now you can go and branch out from this a little bit further and figure out what works best for you. So I consider it more informational rather than influential in that sense.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine. I think indeed the word influencer or finfluencer is not always seen as a very positive one. And I think one of the temptations I think that might have as well, I think in these channels, I mean, is that there are of course parties probably also approaching you to say, you know, hey, can't you talk a little bit more about my product in the market? I got a crypto issuance coming up, and you should definitely mention that in your advice to your followers. That must have happened from time to time. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's so many companies that reach out and so many little brands and crypto coins, whatever. And again, for me, it's more about if uh if it's a legitimate product and a legitimate company, right, then I'm not gonna hesitate to and that's also a good fit for my audience because again, my position and my audience's position is different, right? Because I might be making this much and my audience might be making that much when it comes to certain products. So a lot of the time it's not even that I have to be using the product. Like if I'm using the product and if it's like Robinhood or Fidelity reaches out and I use Fidelity, which is a big broker here in the US, and then I'm like, oh cool, I'll promote it and I also use it, so it's awesome. But sometimes there are certain products that don't make sense for me because my income might be higher than somebody else's that's following me. So I also try to consider it from my audience perspective in the sense, okay, is it going to be more useful for them? Is this company actually going to be useful for them? And even though I don't use it, I'm going to do my research and I'm going to make sure it's legitimate. And then that's how I kind of think about it. But of course, I don't push any sort of just very risky products. I don't talk about, I'm not pushing any sort of coins or any sort of specific things that people should do. It's normally about just certain companies that they can reach that are legitimate, that have, that have funding or that are publicly traded. And that's what I normally tend to look out for when I think about what brands I'm going to work with and whatnot.
Yeah, can imagine. Let's go for you, Taylor.
Oh, yeah, I totally second that. I also think there's this conversation of moral and ethics, business ethics as well too. And so for me, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon prior to this entire path. I have an intrinsic motivation to want to help people and serve my community. And this is just one other way to do that. And coming down to different brand opportunities or partnership opportunities, aside from if it fits within our community, I think there's just some foundational aspects as well too. As an example, kind of correlating it to today's news with SVB, a product that is FDIC insured is a product that I would like to have personally. And so something along just the basics that SPIC, whatever it might be, I think that's something that both Milan and I do a beautiful job kind of going through the ins and outs and vetting these companies and products to make sure that they are ones that we trust. Might not necessarily, like Milan said, have to use because they might not be relevant at this point in our time, but we could use it at some point in time. But just having those foundations that we can sleep at night knowing that we are still serving people in an impactful and positive way.
I think it's also true. I think generally people need to know about the solutions that are out there that could potentially help them. But you always have to be careful indeed. And I think the ethics play an important role there as well, for sure. But this is also, I think, where I think some channels might not, or some influencers, creators might not might not have a different view on the ethics side and be much more on the product push side from that perspective. And I think that's also what's causing a bit of a negative effect on the concept of influence. I think it's really, really, really nice to see how you do that. And so maybe just to bridge back a bit, bridge back towards where we started. I think you both really sort of were coming from an educational system where you gained a lot of knowledge about the financial system, but didn't see that as being sufficient to actually manage day-to-day finance, right? So it's much more focused on business finance and very specific concepts rather than being able to actually get yourself a mortgage, make your own investments, or know how to insure everything that you have. How do you see that we can bridge that? Do you see are there opportunities to actually look at sort of bridging the gap between what education has to offer and what people actually need? Are there ways that you think about that as well, other than what you already do right now?
Currently, we are that bridge. I found this book at Habitat for Humanity, which is basically a thrift store in the United States. It's a chain. And I was in their free books section and I came across this book called Wealth Without Risk. And it talks about foundational principles of wealth. And within one of the first few paragraphs, the author goes to say, the US doesn't teach us in our educational system. So here I am today writing this book.
Okay.
That's from like the 1980s. We're like 4 decades past that now, like almost 4 decades past that now, and things have not changed. Yes, government moves slowly, but I don't think that's slow. And so I think Milan and I truly are that bridge, because prior to this wave of quote unquote influencers or content creators, financial activists, advocates, whatever you want to call them, whatever resonates with you, it just wasn't talked about. And it was only talked about with your financial advisor, if you could afford one, if it was accessible to you. But Milan and I now, and other creators like us, are eliminating the barriers of entry to this entire space, making financial planning, wealth building, wealth management accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. I second all that. I think now, of course, like that book was in 1980s. So now the formats are shifting on how that information is relayed, but there's always going to be something else that comes in to fill that gap when our education system, when our government can't make it a requirement for there to be personal finance classes in school, right? Then there's books being written, and now there's social media. It's just another form of communication. And then the next thing is going to be in augmented reality. There's going to be people doing something over there, right? Literally teaching probably in AI environment type stuff. And it's just the formats are going to keep changing. But again, there's going to be that communication style will change, but that content and that education will continue through people like us that have learned it and that want to share this information. And right now, social media is huge. And then the next thing is going to be AR and augmented reality and stuff. And then it's going to continue to change down the line.
Yeah, I think that's. I think it's great that we got basically this as a supplement, as a knowledge channel. And indeed, I think the challenge indeed is pretty old. I think the Think and Grow Rich, as Milan was also mentioning, is a book from 1930s, I believe. So that's it's a very old time that indeed people feel that they need more power to manage their finances, but don't always get access to that through the public means. So great that you do that indeed. On the note on basically what you see as well, so I mean, you've got, of course, the outbound side of, let's say, informing people about financial means, but I guess you actually also get a lot of inbound requests, questions, remarks that might actually help you, on one hand, sort out what the challenges are today. What are some of the things that you're currently picking up? I think, Taylor, you already mentioned SVB, Credit Suisse kind of misery, where I can imagine quite some people are worried about. What do you see? What do you see people discussing at that level?
Well, I think now the conversation, especially with Fed rate hikes and things of that nature, is inflation and how that impacts our savings as a younger generation. And to me, it will be eroding our savings. So the savings that we contribute now, inflation will erode it for the future. There's also this conversation of, people in their later 20s who were considering buying a house a few years ago when the interest rates were at like all-time lows, 2%, 1.7%, whatever the lowest was. Now they're looking at 7, 8, 9, 10%. And they're having this conflicting battle of, well, is now the time, or should I wait for it to drop again? Will it ever drop that low again? So I feel like all of this stuff is kind of cyclical, and that it moves with the market over whatever time span that is, whether it's a year, 5 years, 10 years. And so those are kind of some of the questions that I've been getting asked about a lot.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And also from inflation, and that conversation comes down to, okay, so if we have to wait to invest our money or to buy a house or whatever, like how do we actually preserve our money and the purchasing power of it, right? So because I mean, with inflation, your money is losing value if you're just letting it sit. So I mean, how do I start investing is a question I get all the time, because a lot of people do want to fight against that inflation and stuff. But again, it's just so many people don't know what exactly to invest in. There's so many different options, and I think that's another big part of the conversation. How do we allocate that money that I do have then? If I'm going to be waiting, if I'm not going to buy a house, if I'm waiting for the interest rate to drop, then what should I do with the money, right? How should I change my plans? So these are all things that people are really thinking about right now. And with the interest rates going up and everything, and like Taylor mentioned, it's definitely changing how a lot of people are thinking about what they want to do.
Yeah, and of course you always have to invest counter-cyclical, but then you have to understand the cycles, right?
Exactly.
That's pretty tough. Ray Dalio actually made quite some interesting write-ups and videos as well about the longer cycles in the economy and how to invest counter-cyclical. Because indeed, also with the housing prices, right? So I mean, if the interest rates go up, the housing prices go down. So that's basically the trade-off. So you have to figure out which one is worse for you or good for you. Yeah.
Right. It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's really hard sometimes to assess. And it's really personal indeed. What you have to put first. So maybe just also to take that on a bit. So do you take any kind of inspiration from other people? Some books were mentioned already, but do you have some people that you say like, okay, we really think that they are actually also very well capable of explaining this, and or they've been a good guide to get started, for example, in this field?
Yeah, personally, it's all over. The inspiration could be from my community who's asking a particular question that I haven't thought about to address based off of my background, etc.
Yeah.
There's also amazing creators like Milan too, who have amazing content that's easy to understand, educational, that I might want to take inspiration from and relate it into a way that resonates with my community and my audience. There might be news articles that are like, wow, that's a really great topic to address right now that could be affecting my community. So there's all these different areas, and I think that's what makes both Milan and I creative, is that creativity is really connecting two unalike things and making them have this synergy together in a way that's like, oh wow, that's really innovative.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm on the same page. It's also, I mean, it could be the randomest thing that you get information from. I might just be reading an article and I'm like, oh, you know what? That's a good video idea. And because I have a personal experience with that, I can add to that concept. Or if I see Taylor's video and I'm like, oh my God, this is an amazing video. And then I'm like, hey, I can add a little bit more to it from my experience that'll resonate with my audience, just like Taylor was saying. And yeah, I mean, inspiration can come from anywhere. And it's just, I think if you're a content creator like us, then you're naturally thinking about this stuff, right? You're naturally thinking, oh, this might be a good piece of content, right, when you come across something. And yeah.
It's almost hard to do anything nowadays. I don't know about you, Milan, but even books, when I read books, I think books are like my new form of entertainment because it's not online or digital. Whereas, posting YouTube videos and doing the social media thing where a lot of people our age do get their content. Now I'm like really into books, but it's hard to kind of turn off oh, that could be a really great idea and highlight it or send it or start doing something. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I have like tons of, literally, I use Notion and I have so many of these just random ideas that come to mind. I just like write them down so I can elaborate on it later. And there's just like literally probably like 100 that I haven't done. There's just so many different things to do. So probably when you're highlighting your books, you probably have that same experience where like, oh, I'm gonna make a video on this, and then another idea, I'm gonna make a video on this, and then you have all these different ideas. But it's just hard. It's also difficult to execute on all of them because sometimes some things are very specific, and I also try to make it so that it applies to as many people as possible.
I bet that's also quite a bit of the fun of actually doing this, right? So to suck up inspiration from everywhere and turning it into your own concept, I think is definitely one of the nice things of being able to do this. Definitely enjoy that as well. Maybe on the note, I think because I think we're almost running out of time. One thing, of course, that must be playing into you as well is that there's a big discussion about the power of big tech firms and whether or not they should be having this reach. For example, in America now, with discussions about potentially banning TikTok. What's your view on that? And is that something that you would basically fear if that would really happen, or is that a minor channel in the way that you communicate currently?
I think one of the advantages or competitive advantages that Milan and I have being in this space, and considering that we both love personal finance, a major part of personal finance is diversification. And we relate that into other aspects of our business. And so it's not just about TikTok. Like Milan has 1 million plus followers too on Instagram and other social media platforms. And so we come at it with almost this advantage that we look at other opportunities with this bird's eye view of, hey, this should probably be diversified too. Maybe we should have our users off platforms and have their emails or phone numbers so that we can reach out to them directly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think TikTok is okay. It's one means of communication, but then for the people that really like Taylor, that enjoy personal finance, Taylor and I like that enjoy, we're gonna find other ways to communicate that. There's so many different ways to do it. So personally, I'm not too worried about the TikTok ban. I know it's going to affect the creator economy in a very major way. But again, I think one thing just leads to another, and there's more opportunities and yeah, like diversification. And Taylor's working on a super cool startup as well, which she can speak on. And right, so like that's why we've just created opportunities for ourselves where we'll be fine if one channel goes out because we're consistently working on new things on how to get this information out there.
Yeah, cool. Taylor, tell us about it.
Yes. So it's called Definitive, DFINITIV.io. And it's all about maximizing your deals, discounts, and offers. I think social media is great and really empowering for financial literacy. But for me, those who want to take the next step, I needed to go ahead and create and co found this startup to build tools to help other people get their money's worth. And especially today's economy when people are talking about global economic recessions. And so the idea is that there are these credit cards, and like Milan said from the very beginning of on the top of the episode, making sure that you utilize your credit card responsibly and you don't encounter these high interest fees is of utmost importance. So when you do actually utilize your credit card responsibly, there are these amazing perks nowadays that credit cards have to offer: cashback points, miles, statement credits, things of that nature. And just so many people don't even know that they exist. And if they do know, they aren't really using them because time is money, and we just don't want to spend our time trying to find and search these deals. And so we're creating a mobile app that allows you to get your money's worth with every purchase by maximizing those deals, discounts, and offers that are available to you.
Cool. Really interesting.
Yeah.
A nice one to knock it out with, I think. So looking forward to follow that, Taylor, to see how that's evolving. A really nice project. Do you have one last thing, maybe a piece of advice that you want to give to people that are listening and say, like, okay, this perhaps where you want to start your financial literacy journey?
For me, it's planting that money tree seed, getting that money tree mindset. Start thinking about different ways in which you can grow your money tree. Start thinking about those roots, your emergency fund, your savings account. If you already have all that set up, start thinking about the environment in which your money tree lives in. Are you in the place where you're building financial resiliency? Do you have more sources of income? Are you protected? Things of that nature. I think this concept expands to everybody at all stages of their personal financial journey. And so to start, it's planting that money tree seed and adopting that growth mindset.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. How about you, Milan?
Yeah, for me, I think it's I think initially, at least actually any stage, but I think just learning how to learn about money, that's going to be extremely important. Because once you learn how to learn, then you're really going to get into it. It's going to be very easy. It's going to be automatic for that tree and the branches to just come out, right? It relates to how Taylor was saying about the mindset. So once you get that down, because after I learned in college how to really learn and start reading these books, like it's just so much opportunity opened up. Like it was automatic. I could easily just learn everything else. right? And that's a big challenge here in the US. Like it's not talked about. The mindset is completely downwards when it comes to learning about money, and talking about it is taboo. So I think that's the biggest thing I want to leave people off with. Just learn how to learn about money.
Great. I think it's a great advice. I think so. Indeed, basically, if I try to interpret it, it would basically say it's not about learning how to make your first investment. It's first on really understanding what is risk and how do you actually manage your financial household. How do you protect it? How can you grow your wealth and so on as a concept before you actually start expanding into all the possibilities that there are.
Absolutely,
I think it's definitely a really wise one to give to everyone. And I really hope as well that everyone was enjoying this conversation today, because I think within Breaking Banks Europe, we usually talked with a lot of bankers, tech firms that are all active in the financial industry, and everyone cares about financial literacy. But it's always hard to execute on actually educating people. So we've been really great to have you on the show and you sharing your insight with us. And really looking forward to keep in touch with you and see if we could bridge the world of fintech and financial literacy, as you're doing quite well at the moment. So thank you very much for being on the show there, Taylor and Milan, and looking forward to see you all again very, very soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.